Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be starting shortly. If you can, at this time, turn off your cell phones or put them to silence. Council meeting is called to order at 1800 or 6 p.m. for everybody else. At this time, we will have the Pledge of Allegiance led by Councilmember Johnson.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Efford, lead us in prayer, please.
Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you. We thank you from the bottom of our hearts for this city, for our friends, for our families, for these beautiful children that we see in our sanctuary tonight. Father, I ask that you would bring the Holy Spirit to touch and anoint our council members, that the actual decisions that are made tonight would really be your decisions. We submit this time and all of this meeting into your hands in the precious name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you, Ms. Efford. At this time, we'd like to have the city clerk do roll call.
Roll call,
I'm sorry.
Councilmember Johnson,
Here.
Lisenovich,
Here.
Paris,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Stump,
Here.
Mayor McGuire.
He is absent. At this time, I need a motion to adopt the agenda.
Motion to adopt the agenda with the removal of new business 3.
May I also ask at this time to have new business 1 moved ahead of public comments?
Okay, anything else?
Do that, but we would have to take public comment on that one item if we did that.
Anything else?
I'll second it.
Okay. Motion to approve the agenda with the changes, which are moving new business 1 ahead of public comment, but having a public comment on that item, and removing new business 3 has been motioned at this time and seconded. City Clerk, can we have a roll call, please?
We can do all in favor.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous.
Okay.
Motion carried. This time, we'd like to hear City Clerk reports and late communications.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Again, from J.M. Powers. Back on January 13th, he knew ahead of time that as of January 22nd, the City Council meeting, that the December financial statements would be 1 week overdue. 14th, City Council should direct the City Manager to charge and collect parcel taxes and water standby fees on Alberto, Canna, and Meister properties. And the last one would be dated January 15th. California City General Fund operating far outpaces general fund revenue. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Any presentations? We have the City Treasurer Middleton report of investment for December 2018.
Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem, Council, staff, and our public. The general fund, on a local agency investment fund, I've been able to move $3 million up into that investment account this past month. Over the last 2 months, I've moved $5 million up. The primary reason that these monies are available is because of the parcel tax that we passed recently in November. The general fund investments now stand at over $15 million earning interest for us. I expect one more bump probably in later this month or early February. That's because of the January payments into the tax collector. Other than that, we're solvent. I maintain about $1 million into our checking account at all times so that we are able to pay our bills. At the last council meeting, it was requested of me to add a statement into the investment policy statement I have on the second page. The statement I added was, the treasurer shall invest the city's monies as permitted in the city's approved investment policy and approved by the city, approval by the city manager and finance director. That's to clarify that I don't move money without their approvals, and I never have. I've been doing this for 4 years. Never moved money without prior approval. And that's all I have.
Thank you. At this time, civic community organizations announcements. Are there any? Okay, I see none. So what we're going to do is we're going to have public comment on new business 1 because we're going to move that ahead of public business from the floor. And new business 1, I will let Councilmember Johnson discuss that because that's something that she's bringing forward.
We recognize our students for their academic achievements, and I think that's wonderful. We recognize them for their athletic achievements, also wonderful. But what we hope at the core of every student is to recognize their character and the development of character. Someone told me a long time ago, character is what you do in the dark or what you do when no one's watching. And I think that the parents and the teachers and anyone who touches a child's life who brings that character forward and they're demonstrating it, I think people need to be recognized for it. So when I was elected to city council, I vowed that what I really wanted to do was to have the city a little more involved with the school system and to see how we could make and promote it and make things a little bit better. So I discussed with Mrs. Newby this idea, and she agreed it's the one place the kids aren't currently recognized. So I'm proposing the City Council institute the City Council Character Recognition Awards. These awards would be given monthly to those students selected by the school administrators, and the students would receive certificates and be recognized at the second City Council meeting each month. I've taken the liberty to anticipate that the council would approve this proposal, for which I ask forgiveness, and I have my certificates printed out and a list of students ready to receive them for the month of January.
At this time, we would like to take public comment on new business 1, which is what Councilmember Johnson just read. So if anybody has any public comment, feel free to come to the podium, say your name, and present your comment.
Rick Warren, I think it's a great idea, and it should have been something that should have been processed a long time ago. Thank you for bringing that in.
Catherine Efford, California City. Congratulations, Councilman Johnson. And I can't tell you how excited I was when I saw the agenda. You know, character is what forms the man or the woman. And children, you're right, don't get recognized for good character enough. So congratulations on this one, and thank you.
Okay, if there's no one else, we'll bring it up here, up to the dais. Any comments? Okay, so there has been, is there a recommendation and a second, a motion and a second?
Does it really require a motion? Or just a consensus to allow it to be on the agenda?
City
Because
Attorney?
this is not an action. We're not really taking an action as much as making a presentation at each meeting.
Could do it by consensus agreement, but the motion just makes it a formal action that you're going to do in your discretion.
Then I would make the motion that we create a city council character recognition awards to be for this school year, and then we can revisit it after the school year is completed.
Second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So it carries. Thank you. Good job. Yes, go ahead.
I'll try not to take up too much of anyone's time. But I do want to recognize the children for exactly what was presented to me, so our community understands what's being done. I first like to call up the two students from Robert P. Ulrich Elementary School, Sincere Clemens and Roland Sanford. Yeah. Your mayor is going to sign these certificates as well, but he's not feeling well this evening. So I'm going to give you these, and you can take pictures with them. But before you leave, if you could just bring them back to me so I can get the proper signature on them, okay? Okay, so which one is Sincere? That's you? Very nice to meet you, Sincere. They said this student uses free time each day working in Ms. Jeff's kindergarten class. And this young man never wants mean words or actions used against others. And I appreciate your character, and I appreciate what you're putting forward in the community. So thank you very much. Thank you. From Hacienda Elementary, I have Lacey Rose, and someone will need to help me with that last name. Gallipold. Lucy's not here. Okay, then Ireland Deese. Hello, Miss Deese. Nice to meet you. This is what was said about Ireland. Ireland is a positive role model in her classroom. She goes out of her way to help others without being asked. She is kind-hearted and is always encouraging to her peers to do their best. She is the first to give her classmates praise for a job well done. Ireland is an awesome jet. So thank you very much. From California City Middle School, Mary Johnson and Trinity Bonnet. Hi, ladies. We're nominated together, so I'm going to read what they said. Both are always willing to volunteer to help with any projects, school events, and/or community events. They don't hesitate to step up and do their best to make the event or project successful. Mary has volunteered for events for me and also helps in the office during lunch or after school. Trinity volunteers to assist teachers during school and after school. They are both very conscientious, give their best effort, kind, considerate, helpful, and are always willing to take on new challenges. So, thank you very much. Thank you very much. The two California City High School students are Lauren Slack and Travis Ray. So Miss Lauren is a senior at Cal City High School. Her positive and respectful manner is noticed by all. Lauren is not only conscientious of her academics, but of those around her. She is truly an example of one who shows her character by example. Travis is also a senior. Travis was one of those students who you just expect to be polite. He opens doors for staff and students, greets everyone with a smile, and is the first one to offer help when he sees the need. One staff member remembers a time when he was frustrated and then came back and apologized for being disrespectful. He's contagious. Thank you very much. You guys are putting good out in the community, and I appreciate it. I have two more, and these are two young people who work with Ms. Swaim at the Senior Center, Kaylin Johnson and John Takis Jr. And I'm going to let her read what she has to say about you. Let me say congratulations. Congratulations.
Hi, my name is Kimberly Swaim, and I run Connecting Generations. It's a community service program that helps our senior citizens in town. I have partnered with the local high school to acquire students to help me clean the Senior Citizen Center every Sunday. That way, the students get their community service hours, and the seniors get a clean center every week. I started this program in November and have had help from several students the last 10 weeks. Tonight, I want to recognize two students who were there with me the first day we cleaned and have continued to help sporadically throughout the last couple of months, Michael and Kaylin. Michael's a sophomore and Kaylin's a freshman. Both of these students were eager to volunteer their services when they heard about the program. They have had positive attitudes each week and put forth 100% effort in helping. During the cleaning process, they displayed leadership skills, teamwork, and persistence. Their hard work and dedication is greatly appreciated not only by me, but by those who occupy the Senior Citizen Center. Thank you guys so much.
And I want to say a special thank you to everyone who came out to support these kids with this resolution. It means a lot. And I think you're headed for wonderful things in life, and hopefully in the future. So thank you all very much.
Okay. Normally, and I talked to city manager, normally we have the staff announcements, and it wasn't on this agenda. City Manager Stockwell, is the staff ready for their reports?
Yeah, staff can present to you what they've got ready.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Police Chief Hurtado.
See if this one works.
Again, everyone, another big round of a big hand for the City Council Character Award recipients.
Since January 1st, we responded to just under 1,000 calls. We've made a little over 30 arrests this month in January. The most noticeable or notable event we've had was last week. We investigated a lost child that was seen in California City. We spent about 25 hours searching for this at-risk child. We had several members from our local desert incident response team. It was joined by Kern County's various search and rescue teams that came out, and also Ohio Patrol. Early Saturday, one of our volunteers, the city volunteers, Jared Newton, had actually spotted the young lady in a field. For those who don't know, it's in Cantil, and it's west of the Honda test track. She was about 300 feet off the roadway, and kudos to him to be able to spot her in the brush. He was able to go out to where she was and bring her back, and ultimately she was reunited with family, and further treatment is being done. But probably the next meeting, I'd like to recognize all those that volunteered for that effort. Some spent the day working their regular day jobs. We're up all night. We tried to feed them early that next morning, and some were falling asleep at the restaurant while we're trying to feed them. But this just goes to show the dedication we have in our community. Lots of people stepped up and helped out, and maybe next month we'd like to recognize those team members that came out for that search. And that completes my presentation.
Thank you, Chief. Chief Goodell.
I would start by, Mayor Pro Tem, council persons, constituents. I would just want to add to that good job, Chief Hurtado and his helpers. That was really needed. It gladdened my heart and encouraged me not to give up on stuff. We just keep plunking on through, and it worked out, and I was really proud of them. Code enforcement, 12 new cases, closed cases 14, complaint forms received 10, new violations 16. That's within my code enforcement unit. Fires 3, EMS/rescue 78, hazardous conditions with no fire 6, service calls 6, good intents 22, total 110, total calls 110, year to date 166, and pretty accurate but rounded call total last year about 28,000. So that's a lot. If you do the math, it's 6-7 calls a day, 15 or so per shift, and a number of competing or simultaneous calls where we able to service almost all of them. Once in a while we get help from assisting agencies, but busy and making good use of your fire department resources.
Chief, just one question. We had more fires than normal. Is it because any particular reason that you see, or any tendency to?
You know, that good segue into a safety message. One of them was a zero clearance stove, fireplace, and they are just that, pretty darn close to zero clearance. And they may have triple walls and all the gadgets and stuff, but sometimes if you miss a rivet or a joint, it will bleed the heat on into the surrounding structural members, which will pyrophorically carbonize. And after a while, that will heat up over a long period, and it will actually cause ignition. The oxygen fuel ratio, blah blah blah, will get correct. all that to say, those are not meant to throw 4 railroad ties, the General Sherman tree in there, and burn it up that evening. Okay? Those, I mean, let's exercise a little bit of logic, a little bit of risk management, and kind of use the appliance for what it's for. And so that was one reason. And another one under investigation is, and I think I mentioned that last time we were together, but Jesse and Jeremy, Sergeant Hightower and Fire Marshal Kosick investigated a structure fire we had. It was caused by illegal cannabis stuff. Vapors migrated down to, blew the door off and caused some pretty widespread damage. And then the other one was a defective heating device. So winter is quite often a time where you will see a little rise.
Public Works Director Platt.
Mayor Pro Tem, Council, and public. As we have witnessed over the last week or so, it does rain. And with the rain in the desert, quite a bit of water, and we know which streets drain and which streets don't drain very fast, which is going to end up having to bring a project forward again that's been kind of on the back burners, which is a storm drain and drainage system for Redwood at Hacienda. Literally one lane disappeared, which would have been the east or southbound lane from South Street to Redwood, the intersection. That whole area drains to that intersection. Well, it looks like we've accomplished the flooding in front of the school, but the drainage to the west side of the road is substantial. And one of the projects there is to add the inlets on that north or that southwest corner and put the drainage back across the corridor and install future would be a piping system all the way down to South Loop. The short term is to do the drainage at the intersection and extend the ditch across 3 street accesses there and tie it into the existing drainage system down at the intersection. We're working on a crosswalk right at Yerba and CCB, and the signage there to go inside with the speed limit change, to go inside with the bus stops, to add, put safe passage there for the buses from Kern Transit that loads and unloads on both sides. We're going to have to do some modifications to the access for the bus because when they switch to the larger buses, they can't make that tight jog off of CCB into the frontage there. So we're going to have to do some modifications, which will come down the road as a set of plans from engineering. We've also had significant problems in the north east corner of the city, as Councilman Stump should know, because he sees the water there quite often. So with a few little earthquakes that were in the region and the water, the rain does not mix with us very well as far as our system. And we've had, last year, we've had about 16, 17 failures in that area of Nelson Drive and Garibaldi. So what I'll be bringing on the next meeting, and we're putting the numbers together to move that project forward and to replace the entire area because that is the highest pressure zone within the city. And that's gonna, we've got material costs over about 10,000 feet of 8 and 6. We'll eliminate the streets that don't serve anybody at this point in time. And it's coming in somewhere right around 780, but I'll have exact numbers that we'll be requesting. So we're about 2 weeks shy of finishing up the section on North Loop and Hacienda, tying over the services now. And when that's complete, we will jump actually to that because that has just become an absolute, the worst section within the city as far as failures. We get one failure there, inevitably it's not going to be one, because as soon as we start shutting anything down to control it, it has a snowball effect, and we end up with usually 2 or 3, and sometimes 4, just by trying to control the failure in that area. So we're going to expedite that project and move that forward. So I'll bring that for authorization at the next meeting. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Finance Director Ibanez.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, council members, staff, and community. We in the Finance Department have started working on our audit. We've been reviewing the trial balance at the end of last year, looking at our accounts receivable, accounts payable, capital assets, and doing our grants reconciliation. All the information is there. We're just going through it to make sure that it posted correctly, and any debits, credits that were not, finding justification as to why they were there and why not. Working with the auditors last week, we noticed some discrepancies, nothing too serious at this point. But again, I will have more thorough review at the next council meeting to give you an update on what's going on with our audit and what the next process should be. Additionally, the December financials are on the website. They do have the adopted budget that the council adopted in November, December, but it's updated, it's there, and tomorrow we will have a link to the budget on our website. It's just been a busy time with auditors in last week, and other than that, that's all the report I have this evening.
Thank you. Parks Manager Deverin.
Sorry.
Oh, I said thank you, and then
Linda's off celebrating her 23rd anniversary. Marriage anniversary.
one thing that Parks did is there was a art fair that was at the art building, art in I forgot what the building is called. Community Arts Center, and it was very good. I don't know if any of you here, I know some people here had pictures there, photos in displayed, but it was very good, and hope all of you attend those more in the future. I mean, it was great. We have a lot of talented people here in the city, so it was very good. I don't, if anybody else has any things that she did, if they want to present that now. Okay. Next is City Manager Stockwell, city update.
No, I have nothing further to report.
AB 1234, council updates. Anyone? Okay. At this time, public business from the floor. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons desiring to address the City Council on any matter not on this agenda and over which the City Council has jurisdiction. Please state your name for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Monica Zuccaro, and I am here to discuss some things with animal control. I understand from a posting that was on the website that last council meeting there was discussion about making spay-neuter a requirement here in Cal City. I personally really support that. I'm just not sure how well we can enforce it. I support it because I've volunteered at other shelters before, and I've seen all the unwanted and abandoned animals that have been that have to be euthanized, and it's heartbreaking. And I think that spay-neuter is one measure that can really prevent that. So I looked at the whole thing, the whole website on Ion Cal City, and I have a couple of recommendations that I feel will make it a little bit easier or better for some of us here in Cal City to look at the option of either spay-neuter or what else we can do with animals. So my first thought and recommendation is this: when you open Ion Cal City, you have like 6 major tabs. Okay, under the tab of department, you have another 9 sub tabs, and under the sub tabs you have one that says police, and then you open that up, and there you have all the information about animal control, which, in looking at all of it, is really super. I mean, there's some great information out there, and the shelter here in Cal City has a lot of work to do, and they're really handling it quite well. But I thought, it took me a lot to find this. My recommendation is, can we make this easier? Instead of having it under different subcategories, maybe we can just give it its own tab and list it animal care, wellness, and control. Because I've talked to some of my friends, and they say the same thing. They go, really? I didn't know all that stuff was out there. Well, you kind of have to look for it a little bit, but how about we make it a little bit easier for people to find that tab so they can have all the information ready and available for them. So my next recommendation would be that when we have our own separate tab, that we list we list our vet here in Cal City, phone number, hours of operation, where they're located, and that we also list other veterinarians in the area, in this county, and that we also list other rescues where people can take their animals, like dumping them in the desert. I live at the end of Rome Beauty Drive, so I boarded the desert, and I can't tell you what I've seen people dump out there. I personally have rescued 3 kittens, a Chihuahua, another medium-sized dog, and I know there's some really nice people in this town that have done that also. But I'm thinking maybe we can give
Mayor Pro Tem.
people an option.
Okay, your time is up now, but if you want, City Manager Stockwell, is there anyone she should talk to, or talk to you, or
I have
anyone?
a couple of copies also, if you'd like.
Yes, if you could turn those in, and we'll have the police department contact you.
I'm sorry?
Did you want me to give you some of these copies? Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to go on my time.
Thank
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hello, David Bondrob. I live at 7413 Aliso Court in Bakersfield, but I have several rentals here in California City. Unfortunately, I had one of my rentals, unbeknownst to me, turn into a marijuana house, and I'm trying to get a permit, and your city is saying that I have to get a inspection for asbestos and lead-based paint. Both of those materials were they stopped using those in construction in 1977 and 1976. Every inspector that I'm talking to saying, don't they know that they stopped using them in 1976 and 1977, and there's no use getting those inspections because they're not there, because they stopped using those in construction in 1976 and 1977. In order to facilitate repairs of those unfortunate landlords who had their tenants turned into drug properties, could we please just, if the house was built in 2005, which mine was, there's no need to get an asbestos report or a lead-based paint report because they're not there. Thank you so much.
Check into that because I haven't heard anything of that. And I'm not going to throw numbers out there as far as asbestos. So I'll find out some information and follow that up. But yeah, 2005, even the latest stuff, which was in the flooring tiles, which I believe is like 82. I don't know of any other asbestos or lead-based paint. So
we'll contact, if you'll give us a phone number, we'll contact you directly and work that out.
You want me to give that to you right now?
Yeah, but you don't have to tell me, just write it on a note with contact.
Mr. Stockwell, our city inspector said he could address that if he would.
Yeah, so although they're supposed to stop using asbestos and lead in 1978, they haven't. We actually, in some of these grow houses, we found lead-based paint on a home that was built in 1995, and we found asbestos in a home that was built, I believe it was like 2003. So we're still finding it, and that's why we're requiring it. We just want to, after these homes are finished and completed, as a city, we just want to be able to say that we did everything right, and there's no issues with any chemicals or hazards. That way we make sure we don't put the city at a liability.
Thank you, Mr. Berrigan.
Hello, good evening. I'm Jennifer Blake, Redneck Boulevard, California City. I wanted to address the council. I am part of the school site council at California City Middle School. I met with parents today, and they asked for me to bring two issues to you as they were unable to make it today. One of those is something I'm working on with them as a Men of Integrity and Women of Character group. We are asking for our city council members and our community members to please volunteer and help us maybe once a month or once every other month, just spending a half an hour and working with some young men and women who could use some good role models in their lives. So we're trying to get that up and running by March. So if anyone is interested, they can contact our office, and we would love to pencil you in. Even if you're only able to make it once in a while, we would just love to have some community members influence our students. The other issue that was brought up by several parents in our group today, they are requesting that the city do some further education, maybe put up billboards regarding the marijuana. We are noticing a huge issue with parents thinking that they can drive their children and drop them off at school, and they're opening the car doors and marijuana is coming out. The students are arriving. The parents are quite concerned because their children are exposed to this and they're being exposed. So I will talk with Chief Hurtado a little bit more, but I was asked to bring that to your attention as they knew we were doing the awards today. So they are just requesting that we do maybe a little more community education on impaired driving is still impaired driving, and that it's concerning to them. So thank you.
Ms. Blake, do you have a number, a
Yes.
telephone number for?
It's 760-373-3241, and that's the school phone number. I can slide you my cell phone number.
Thank you. I'm sorry you've had. I'm sorry, you've already had your time, so we.
Council, Mayor Pro Tem, Council and Public, Catherine Efford, California City. On the issue of spay and neuter requirement for animals in California City, it would be a wonderful idea. We need to do some more research and some extensive litigation examination on that particular subject, but it would be great. The reason I'm up here tonight, however, we have had 2 incidents in California City in the last 3 weeks. One was 4 dogs getting through a fence and attacking a lady's pit bull, which is a service dog for her husband. He's a disabled vet. And yesterday, no, I take that back. This morning at 7:15, a gentleman on Hemlock Avenue had 4 little dogs, and he put them out to the backyard, and he went back in the house, and all of a sudden he heard a commotion. He went out, it was about 7:15, and there were 4 dogs, and he has a video. So I'm hoping he'll post it on Facebook. It's like right just east of Nerelia Road on Hemlock is his street. But he said he saw these 4 dogs. They looked like German Shepherd type fluffy dogs. And they went, when he went out and chased them out, of course it was too late. But they went out and went north. So if you live north of Hemlock, between Nerelia and Hacienda Boulevard, be aware. Be aware. Because once a dog tastes blood, they're just like any other animal that's carnivorous. They will, and they appear to be on a rampage. They will be looking not only for little dogs, but bigger dogs, and they'll look for people. So if you're going to go out, you're going to go jog, make sure you carry a big stick or some sort of protection so that if these dogs show up to attack you, you can take care of yourself. And so that's what I wanted to tell everybody tonight. I hope everybody listening here's what I have to say. Keep your dogs inside. When you put them out, go out there and watch them and take your protection with you. Thank you.
Catherine, were any of the dogs injured or killed? Of his 4?
All 4 were killed.
Thank you.
All 4 were killed. The pit bull that was attacked by the 4 a couple of weeks ago, she's got a vet bill of like $1,800. And, you know, and it's climbing. I mean, I took one look at that poor, beautiful pit bull who was mauled by 4 dogs. She said they had him up in the air and were throwing him around. It's really gruesome to see. But the 4 little dogs, none of them survived.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and Council Public. My name is Al Hudson. Pretty well familiar with me. I've got about 2 or 3 things here that I want to talk about. I'm going to take my 2 big dogs over to the dog park. But a friend of mine told me to do it because there's bordella running rampant in the dog park. But I went over and looked at it, and that dog park to me is substandard. Because where I lived up in Concord, the dog park was about 4 or 5 times that big, and they had a section fenced off for smaller dogs. And I think with the space that the city has, that they should adopt something very, very similar so that the big dogs are not mixing with the little dogs, because the little dogs will attack the big dogs. And this we need to have the area tested for bordella. The next item that I have is at the last council meeting, you went into closed session on check number 104-244. That was for $300,000. Government Code 45957.1 provides that the public be informed on the material facts and the cause and the settlement agreement. That is not being done. I've checked it on Fine Law, and I've checked it with the State Attorney General. And we need to have more transparency on that, Counselor. And I think, oh yeah, there was another thing. As I understand it, there was a accident involving a city vehicle. And what I like to get there and look at things and check things. And I went to the city's website, and I had one hell of a time trying to navigate the city ordinance. That needs to be put in a format that is user-friendly. You just can't go to the city clerk, or you look on that blue banner across the top and click on the city ordinance and bring it up. It just is not user-friendly. And what I was really, really looking for was the procedure when city property is damaged and we don't, it just isn't there. It's not like most other cities' formatted ordinances. And I believe that's all I have. And, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hudson. City Attorney, is there anything that you want to address or not address or on any of that? Okay, if we don't need to.
Proper statements were made.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay.
Mayor Pro Tem, Council, a couple quick things. Ron Smith, California City. First, I had the opportunity. I've been able to join the grandfather's club. I've been able to hold my first grandson that survived the womb. So I allowed him to experience, and he fell asleep I didn't. But I want to first state as a citizen where I lament the loss of Captain Andrew Roach and his loss to our community. I'd like to publicly thank him for his years of service to our community. And Victorville is going to be very well served by him. Also like to state, without using any names, some of you have received mail today that was unsolicited, and I was shocked with a couple of my fellow citizens that received some mail that appears to be very much a smear campaign, and because of pictures that anybody could take these pictures that had nothing damning in them, I just assumed that there had to be truth to it. So I would encourage you, without saying anything more than that, if you've received a manila packet with a bunch of pages in it, you'll look very foolish if you're going to believe everything that you read without having opportunity for something to be researched and investigated. Lastly, I was very surprised for a payout of $300,000 to a former employee of this community. Remember, it was a public safety tax. It wasn't just any parcel tax, it was a public safety tax. And it seems citizens' money was spent pretty loosely. There are some things that need to be stand upon principle, and pragmatism typically gets us in trouble. When it comes to the matter of the consent calendar, I was kind of shocked as I listened to discussion on the consent calendar, as it appears that the City Council is moving to try to streamline things. Silencing the citizen ought not to be one of them. And I would encourage you to ponder that. But when it comes to the consent calendar, is it an absolute waste of time to vote on something for checks that have already been cut? Is it just going through the motions? Why bother discussing? Why have our council, our elected officials, vote if it's already been decided ahead of time? Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, seeing no more, we will now go to the consent calendar. All items on the consent calendar are considered routine and non-controversial and will be approved by one motion if no member of the council, staff, or public wishes to comment or ask questions. Public comments to be limited to 3 minutes. Roll call vote required. Any comments?
Again, it's Al Hudson. Check number 104375. That's to Andy Financial for $4,625.
Could you repeat it again, please, Mr. Hudson?
Check number 104375. That's to Andy Financial. The question there is, are we using an outside financial service when we have an accounting department here, or just why, or what is Andy's Financial being contracted for? The next check is 104528. It's going to Nagel for $9,022. And PMC for golf carts, check number 104534 for $4,683.65. Is that for the lease of the golf carts, or just what is that about? May I have? Well, I have one other thing too. On the properties that's being converted over to so that for cannabis development, it's a matter of mention on the news. The proposed or pending Attorney General, Federal Attorney General Barr, is going to leave cannabis alone, and he's not going to disturb the cook policy of the previous administration. And I think that that's all that I have. But could we please discuss check 104375 and the whys of it, because this is on a regular basis. Okay, thank you. Okay, are we breaking even or coming close on the rental?
Mr. Hudson, if you have any questions, it has to be on the checks that you asked, so.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, thank you.
That was it.
Anyone else?
Mayor Pro Tem Council, it was my plan to, I feel like I've been wasting my time coming to council, but when I saw on the agenda that there was a desire to limit the citizens to be able to speak, to put other things in place, it's a matter of principle. And there are other citizens, as a matter of principle. I think you're really opening a can of worms with this. I have a question on CC1, approved check registers dated through January 16, 19. Does it really matter if you approve this, or a check's going to be cut anyways? Does it really matter? That would be my question.
It is a check register, meaning the checks have been cut and are ready to be mailed out.
So, if you disapprove the checks, does that mean anything, or are we just wasting our time? As elected officials, if you vote to disapprove a check, what happens with that? Does anything happen, or are we going through emotions? We've elected you folks to protect the citizens' money. You represent us, and we spend a lot of time in the check registers, but if they're going to go out anyways, if you disapprove them, what does it matter?
Pastor Smith, that's a very good question, and I think our attorney could probably answer that if there are any legal. Okay.
Very simply, purchasing is a very simple process. You buy something, you pay for it. The city budget authorizes the various city operations to purchase a multitude of different things. Sometimes it's services, sometimes it's products in hand. The purchasing procedures that the city has in place authorizes staff under the direction of the city manager to purchase money that is budgeted in each of the departments. And so the check register simply is I'm not sure why it's on your agenda, but it is, and it's been here since I started, because you don't control expenses after you've made the purchase. You control expenses prior to making the purchase. And the control the council has on purchasing is the purchasing policies and procedures that have been adopted and that we follow. And in every case that was here, these purchases have followed those purchasing procedures and policies. And so they are, occasionally it turns out it's an informational item where council can find out what a specific expenditure was. But in all the time since I've been here, starting last December, there hasn't been one purchase that was brought up by the council where it was determined that we should refuse to pay for the service or the items that had already been contracted for. So I can't answer the question why the council and the public wants to look at these, since you control it. And that's why I suggested at the last meeting, if you truly want to control expenditures over the kind of questions that are being asked, then we should be bringing those expenditures to you for approval before they're made, which would add tremendously to the time that it takes to operate the city day to day. For example, on our linen service, you know, that's been a question we've asked before. There are issues that arise where questions have been asked and answered, but none of them has resulted in canceling a transaction because we've contracted for these things. We need to pay for them. And so as I mentioned in the last time this was brought up, we will be bringing to the council an update of the purchasing and procedures, as well as our overall policies and procedures as far as personnel. And so if the council wants to change the purchasing procedures for the council to take a more active role in examining expenditures before they're made, the council will be free to do that when we examine those procedures. Until then, this is reviewing expenses after the fact.
So one thing that we can do, I'm glad City Manager Stockwell brought it up, and I kind of touched on it in the last City Council meeting, is possibly the City Council should put a limit on the amount of money that they can spend prior to bringing it to the council. Yes, it will slow things up, but only by 2 weeks, and possibly that's something we'll have to discuss at another time. So at this time, I'm going to ask that be put on the next agenda, and I'll come up with more formal wording in that, but it'll be on the next agenda for a new business item.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Stump. I had a little bit of time left over. It says to approve. If it's not going to be changed, then as City Manager Stockwell said, it should state review. If you have no teeth as elected officials, then it shouldn't be approval. If you disapprove and nothing gets changed, it should be just simply a review if you're not going to change it. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, if I could just add something to that.
Okay, go ahead.
Just in my experience with cities, they will go through and adopt a policy, as was referenced. The idea being that when the city council, first of all, is looking at its budget and how it's going to allocate, they make decisions at that time how much they're going to give for different categories to each department. The departments are then entrusted through the city manager to make certain purchases. But part of the reason for this check register is to be the public disclosure that the public can then see, generally after the fact, to say, hey, why are we spending so much on this, or why is that sort of a thing occurring? There's public disclosure. It's true it's after the fact, but that's kind of the way business is run. You have the opportunity to determine in a budget how things are going, what the kinds of things the council wants to have spent. And then there's a policy that says that at below this amount, the city manager has authority to execute a contract. It's very common to give a city manager, for instance, in Placentia, up to $25,000. Now that's Placentia. Other cities want it at 15, others at 10, maybe at 5. But at some level, you give the city manager, because he's hired to do that, to make those kinds of decisions, to make purchases. And other purchases have to come to the council to get approval. And so there are contracts that may come to the council. Once the council approves that contract, or staff has approved it if they're authorized to, we have to make those payments. So we can't be holding up every one of those checks. We have to pay for the uniform or whatever it is that we've contracted for. So I think the best thing to do, as was mentioned, is to bring the policy back and for the council to determine at what levels they feel comfortable entrusting city manager authority, maybe even department level authority, $500 or under, or something like that, and at what level it needs to come to the council.
And since your firm represents, other cities, you might want to be in that discussion with us and, tell us things that you see, recommendations that you see in other cities that are similar to us and financially similar to us.
Mr. Vice Mayor, to the council, when we are given this as a already completed service for which remuneration is indicated, it is our last opportunity to say that we think it is in the budget or not. And as much as not, we're having issues where we're feeling that things are being done that we didn't feel were covered in the budget. Would that not be a sound reason for approval or not approval? Is that not what we're supposed to be doing? We've already approved a budget to begin with, but now what we might have is a question that says, we don't believe it's in the budget, and that these are actions being taken on outside the scope of what we feel the budget encompasses. And that would that not be just reason to pull something out and say we will not pay it?
Again, you go back to the procedure. The procedure is that the role of the finance department in purchases is that as those work their way through, only those things where budget authority exists are allowed. So when the department does a requisition,
What account was the $300,000 taken out of?
out of the city's reserves, I mean, you're getting into something we can't discuss.
What's not in the budget, in other words?
Well, the
It's
reserve
not in
is
the
part of
budget.
the budget, but it was approved by the council before it was done. So that was
Not
an
by
expense.
this council.
It was approved by a council that had the authority to approve it. But the point being that the finance department reviews every expenditure before it's made to be sure that there is budget authority for that particular department to spend the money in that identified line item.
So the finance department then is taking the function of the city council to establish policy by determining where those dollars go and don't go.
The finance department is taking the responsibility the council delegated to them in the purchasing policies and procedures.
Okay.
Well,
Thank you, Mr.
Stockwell,
Mayor,
on,
Vice Mayor.
Again, going back to Andy Heath Financial Services, which is a finance consulting service. You hired the man. Did you have council approval to do so?
I don't think council approval is necessary because it's part of the budgeted finance department. We haven't overspent the finance department line items. The authority is there to continue to do those things.
So you outsource the finance to a finance consulting service without coming to council. You know, we want transparency. It's not so much that you did it, it's the fact you did not come to council and say, do I have approval to do this or not? Okay? Since you feel it's in their budget, you can hire whoever you want, even though it's an outside agency or consulting firm. I disagree with you totally. It's not in your purview to be able to go out and hire people just because you have it in the budget, especially when it's an outside consulting firm. You need to come to council to do it.
Okay, I think, Mr. Sh-
Ladies and gentlemen, David Stafford, California City. So we're going to talking about drilling an agricultural well for the
It's
golf
on the
course?
agenda.
Pardon?
It's on the agenda.
Okay, well, that's what I just read.
We're on the consent calendar.
Consent calendar.
Oh, okay, well, are you that's, oh crap, I'm place?
Yes, you are.
So,
Later.
Mr.
So
Stafford,
you've
if you
already
can
passed
come.
that, or?
We haven't gotten to it yet.
Okay, well then, excuse me, I'll come back.
Mr. Vice Mayor.
Yes.
Not as not to be pulled for separate discussion, but just as questions about it. 104385 Alexander Contract Services. I was wondering if I could be given some sort of a brief report on guarantees from the company on their performances, and then also what is the city doing to ensure that those performance statistics are being or performance goals are being met. It's water meter readers, so I want to know what their accuracy is on meter reading and what we're doing to make sure that they are performing to that standard. And that's
We get a report every single month, and a lot of it accompanies actually photo presentations of meters that are in question. So we monitor high, low, which come back automatically as reports, and staff then creates a list after the reads have gone through that we go out and double check random meter locations for accuracy of those reads.
Could I be given a copy of that report from some month?
Yes, and they also send us on a monthly is a fix and repair report that we actually go like underwater or the dials, but something, whatever it is, and so we also pull that report on a monthly basis.
Could I see?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Seeing none. So at this time, we'll have a roll call vote.
You need a motion.
Oh, I need a motion, I'm sorry.
And I make that motion.
Motion is made, second. Anyone?
I second.
Madam Clerk, roll call at this time.
Councilmember Johnson?
Yes.
Lucinovich?
Yes.
Paris?
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Stump?
I'll vote yes.
Agreed.
Continued business. CB1 is State and Federal Engineering Services Public Works Director Platt.
Mayor Pro Tem and Council and public, as you know, we have flown quite a few different avenues looking for engineering services. The state and federal was a process that we're using for the state and federal projects, which was the first one we flew. This was the second flying of that for those services. These agreements and everything had to be approved by the FAA, and they had to be approved by State of California Caltrans. The current engineer, as we all know, Helton Engineering announced he was be closing their operations on January 31st, 2019, due to the retirement of Jerry Helt. On October 25th, 2018, the City of California has requested sealed statements of qualifications for professional engineering services for federal and state-funded projects. The RFQ notice was posted in the Bakersfield Californian, Mojave Desert News, Antelope Valley Press, the city's website, and Indeed.com. The scope of this proposal is to assist the City of California City in all aspects of construction projects, including but not limited to construction management, including necessary change orders, material testing, soil testing, environmental clearances, and completion and or approval of all required documents. A successful firm will be required to represent the city at all state and federal project audits. The closing date was extended from November 29th, 2018 to December 27th, 2018 by addendum. One response was received from BHT Engineering. Per Caltrans procedures and updates to Chapter 10 of the Local Assistance Program Manual, the RFQ was reviewed and approved by both federal and state agencies. The RFQ submitted by BHT Engineering was reviewed by staff and found to be complete. Upon approval by the City Council, City staff will submit to the state for final review and approval. Recommendation is Council authorize the City Manager to execute an agreement with BHT Engineering, Inc. to serve as the engineer for California City for federal and state projects. This is not the city engineer's position.
Any comments from the public on this?
Yes, Al Hudson. With the selection of the engineer, I see that you advertise in the Mojave News and the Bakersfield. The question is, why didn't you advertise in professional journals and in the Los Angeles Times and such, where there's a wider, potential selection. And the other thing is looking over their rates and charges. How do those compare with Helt Engineering? Is there any type of savings by utilizing Helt's former employees? And how quick, I just think it's amazing how quickly they put together all of their rates and charges, unless they adopted the same ones that Helt had. I think that we need to look a little bit further and a little bit deeper for a contract engineering firm. Thank you.
They're actually less than the original contract under Helt.
Anyone else?
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, Council. Real brief. Thinking back to some of the conversations about the state and federal projects, I seem to recall you saying, Mr. Platt, that there were times that Helt was very effective in writing grants on some of these state and federal. Will that also be the case with this gentleman?
I believe so. Otherwise, I don't think we would be recommending them. The contracts managed by the former engineer, Helt Engineering, under state and federal, the city received a lot of projects and funding from the state and federal, and have never been dinged by the state and or the feds on any project. The tracking, to say the least, of the requirements on the reports dealing with state and federal projects, which, talking state, that means it's all federal money, so you have to meet all federal requirements even on state projects, is extensive and very time consuming. An audit on a single project, which we did here not too many months ago on a very small project, we still spent multiple days just putting all the information together. I believe we will continue to be able to provide the city with projects and meet deadlines, and we have been able to do that on virtually every project that I'm aware of. We have always managed it and have received all of our funding. We have not lost any funding due to lack of performance or bad work.
So you're hoping for a seamless transition. You're hoping for the positive benefits of having the grants continue for the benefit of the city and the gentleman that you've selected and presented. Your hopefulness is that he'll be consistent with achieving the grants as well.
Yes.
Okay, and thank you very much.
Anyone else? Okay.
And remember that the process for this is still going to we're going to spend weeks still putting all the documentation and the paperwork together to have the state review it and accept us. If this isn't compliant with the state, they can also reject it, and believe me, they will if things are not in order.
Up here.
Yes, I have a question on their first page. It says BHT Engineering, Inc. is a California corporation that was established in 2018 as an engineering firm focused on consulting services with municipal clients in Kern County. That was middle page. If you go down to their last paragraph, it says, we have been fortunate to have been able to work with the city, I'm assuming California City, since 1998, and look forward to the opportunity to continue our relationship with the city. So, were these individuals working under Helt Engineering at the time they worked in as far back as 1998?
Yes.
In your opinion, Mr. Platt, do you feel that this is just a change of name from Helt Engineering to BHT Engineering?
No, because the actual format of Helt Engineering was Helt Engineering, and their billing practices was Helt Engineering. That has all been dismantled, and this will be under a different format. The state and federal projects is a total recovery of what is state and federal projects allow in engineering. So those are almost all pass-through dollars for projects and are regulated by the state and by the federal government of the cost associated and allowed to be charged to a project. So they run very smoothly, plus they have to justify every single dollar. Is it going to be under the same bill? Absolutely not. We will not do the billing practices as was done, and we have already abandoned the original practices because they were not transparent.
Exactly. With all the problems we had with health engineering, I just don't want to reconstitute it with a name change.
Absolutely, I totally agree.
Thank you.
This is strictly for state and federal engineering services.
Yes.
What is the process we're going through to address the other engineering needs inside the community?
We have flown another RFQ, which was for state projects only because it doesn't work for the federal projects, which I'll be bringing back at the next meeting, along with 2 engineers that also applied for city engineering services, and I'll also be presenting. So we will approve, and I will request approval from multiple different engineering firms to manage city projects. So we have availability of engineering services that we can roll or transition projects to. So we won't have all our eggs in one basket.
And at this point, this was the only engineering firm that made a proposal for the state and federal projects.
Yes, because it is a very daunting process to go through. Most cities have stopped doing it this way because of the problems dealing with Caltrans and have gone to on-call engineering services. One I will be bringing back, which was projects up to 150,000, but it's only state projects, which would and it's just engineering fees. It's not the dollar amount of the project, which would usually cover somewhere between 2 and 3 projects that the city would do, which might ran over 2 or 3 years. Remember, state projects, any of these run over usually 2 to 3 to 4 years from the time of approval to the end of construction.
Thank you.
I have
Question?
one more.
Okay, go ahead.
So, is it Ramon that carries the PE?
Juan. Ramon is actually a licensed civil engineer, not in the state of California. And Miguel is a architect. Juan is the civil.
Okay, thank you.
I have a couple of questions for you, Public Works Director. The RFQ, where did you release the RFQ to?
Indeed, as you know, is all over. That is very broad-reaching, and we had to also go through the state to, who we released it to and where it was advertised. We need to be within the region that we're working because they have to work within Kern County and Kern Cog because we are represented for all our transit needs through Kern County, through COG, which is the representation of all transit funds through Kern County.
What I don't understand is Mr. Pandoja has he's a PE with a license, and that's a California license. So why didn't we look for representation in like Lancaster or Palmdale? Because that license should be applicable here, even though it's a different county. It's still a California state license.
Absolutely. I had calls and information to several large firms, and this was the only. That's why we extended it to actually get a broader scope of people that had showed interest, and we still didn't receive any quotes.
So this was the only RFQ?
This was the only RFQ. Most cities have really stopped doing the RFQ because they've gone to the on-call, which has no requirements tied to it. We also will go that route just so and I received two quotes from that, one from a Bakersfield firm and one actually from both Bakersfield firms, one from a very large firm and one from a smaller firm. Same thing, I did receive a quote for the city engineer RFP that was sent out, one from Lancaster or it'd be from Lancaster or Palmdale, and one from Bakersfield.
Okay, because it's just, I'd like to know who Ridgecrest uses, who Lancaster uses, who Palmdale uses. You know, to get somebody over the mountain is probably a lot harder than to get somebody from the Antelope Valley.
Yeah, I talked to several firms and ended up this was still the only one. And the problem is dealing with Caltrans. It's become a very daunting thing. And as we know from one of our sister cities that is in a major lawsuit and they pulled their funding, there's problems with dealing with the state under federal money.
Okay.
And they've done an excellent job for us. If they didn't, I wouldn't be standing here recommending them because I don't want to accept a problem. I want to fix problems, not create them.
I just looked at some of the charges, the hourly charges, and I thought they were excessive. So I don't know, maybe I don't know. It just seemed pretty high to me.
Yeah, and they're all regulated by the state of what is allowed in a project. So the state and federal, the FAA, obviously been doing this. This is nothing comparative to engineer firms I've used on federal projects. Most of the time, these are huge firms that are national, and that would be our only next bet to go to because not many local firms actually do federal FAA projects. You have to understand airports, and usually those are large firms that deal with that, and they usually deal with FAA, period, as part of their projects.
One more question for our city attorney. Are we required by our municipal code to get 3 bids?
Services like this, typically, if you put it out to bid and you get responses, those are the responses that you get, and you can select the one if that's all you get. So that's probably sufficient. What's occurred here.
Okay,
so you may get 3, you may get 10, you may only get 1. And in that situation, then the council has discretion to accept it.
If the municipal code says 3 and we violate that, as you know, it is a misdemeanor, and I do not want to be purview to committing a misdemeanor because we didn't get 3 bids. So I want you to be sure, Counselor, that we're good to go on this without putting our council here in jeopardy.
No, I'm confident that you're fine. It was publicly bid, and as long as you've done that, you've met your obligation.
And it doesn't say you will get 3 bids. What it is we want 3 bids. So when we go and solicit internal quotes and everything, you want 3 bids. The state wants 3 bids, and they recognize that some districts have a hard time getting people to make proposals. But it doesn't say you have to have 3 bids or you reject everything. We have rejected, as you know, council knows, we have rejected bids because they exceeded the project cost by a considerable amount of dollars. And some of those we've done internally then and then managed them as a project. Swimming pool being one of those. The state is going to look at it very hard because we only received 1 bid. And so they're going to do that also. But our municipal code doesn't say you have to have 3 bids. You want 3 bids.
I believe the code says anything over $10,000 were required 3 bids, and that's what I was going on.
Okay.
Yeah, normally there's a different rule when it comes to like professional type services. You endeavor to get that, you broadcast it as widely as you can, and ultimately if only 1 responds, then the council has that kind of discretion a decision based on what they think is best for the city. You may, in some situations, councils will say, no, send it back out and republish it and broadcast it to these other wider areas, and then of course, that takes time and money. But you have discretion here, since it sounds as though it was broadcast as required by the code.
Thank you.
Any more discussion? Okay, it is time for us to decide on what to do.
Motion to authorize the city manager to execute an agreement with BHT Engineering to serve as engineer for the California City for federal and state projects.
I second.
City Clerk?
Councilmember Johnson? Lisenovich?
Yes.
Paris?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Stump?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you, council. And just as a backup, remember, we will be bringing back up to 150, so we will have a fallback if we need one.
Okay, next is new business 1. We've already done that. New business 2 is the government shutdown. Finance Director Ibanez. Question for you. Do you know about how many people are affected in our city? Okay. Okay, good. Any questions from anyone out there? Comments or questions?
David Stafford, Cal City. If it has to do with any of our men and women of this town that is in this situation, I think it'd be the city's responsibility to step up and show them we can help them any way we can. This is one country, so let's help us all out. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stafford. Anyone else? Okay, we'll bring it up here. Any comments up here?
I'll start. I echo Mr. Stafford's sentiments. I think it's a fantastic idea, and it's a way for us to help our community get through this crisis, because we're all one family here. So, yeah, I agree.
Do I hear a motion?
I'll go ahead and make the motion that we help our furloughed residents by extending payment deadlines and waiving late fees for their utility bills. Once the shutdown is over, we can revert back to normal billing.
Second.
Approved. I mean, it's been motioned and seconded. City Clerk?
Councilmember Johnson?
Yes.
Lisenovich?
Yes.
Paris?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Stump?
Yes.
Motion carried.
New business 3 has been put aside. New business 4 is City Municipal Agricultural Well, Public Works Director Platt.
Mayor Pro Tem, council, and public, city staff has been researching ways to reduce operating costs for Central Park Lake, Tierra del Sol, and the Par 3 golf courses as it relates to water from the city's municipal water system. Water usage for fiscal year 2017, 18 total 200 usage was 236 million 81,516 gallons, or 724 acre feet, at a cost of $1.3 million, $4,132.77. The city's wastewater treatment plant provides recycled water to Central Park Lake that currently supplies only a portion of the water needed for Tierra del Sol Golf Course, in total 579.8 acre feet from July 2017 through June 2018. The most efficient way to reduce operating costs would be to install a new agricultural well, and by doing so would eliminate the use of potable water on these properties and would greatly reduce operating costs. The estimated pumping costs will be approximately $75,000, and this is electrical, $75,000 per year, using 2017-18 metered water usage, and an estimating operating expense of around $200,000 per year to operate the system. Staff requested 3 proposals and received 2 quotes as follows. The Legend Pump and Well Service, which is doing work for the city and has done a considerable amount of work, for $450,642. Bakersfield Well and Pump, $399,750. $25,000 will be used by city staff to make connections to existing facilities. Staff recommendation: authorize Public Works Director to execute agreement with Bakersfield Well and Pump for $399,750 to install 1 agricultural well, and authorize the Finance Department to set up an expense line item under Fund 95-728-410 for $425,000.
Any comments from anyone in the audience?
I'm back. David Stafford. Okay. Agriculture, well, yes, I see it 100%. It makes total sense. It's something that needs to be there. But this same thing needs to go out to our farmers that's going to be doing agriculture on these grows and stuff that's in these towns. Instead of hitting them with 5, tiers up to God wouldn't know how high it's going to go, let's let them do this. Save our structure on our city. Let's move the farms to beef farms with agriculture, and let's do them all the way. My property, they tell me $500,000. We can grow, if we go drill the well out there and we can supply it to ourselves and our neighbors that's out there, why shouldn't we as a city be saving our pumps treated water? We don't need treated water for agricultural. And let us go, right along these same basis, let's extend this out to the industry and see if we can help people along and get it to happen. Thank you.
Good evening again, Mayor Pro Tem, Council, and staff. On the subject of the agricultural pump, just bring you back to this discussion a couple of years ago where the city wasn't actually metering its water use and then finally decided to comply with the law. We're grateful for that. I'm not sure this subject would be coming up today if the ratepayers were paying this. So now that the city is lawfully paying its fair share, it's nice to see this solution come forward. Mr. Stafford is talking about the industry cluster, the cannabis industry. It's imperative that this city recognize, in order to sustain the services in this city, we've got to treat the industry cluster as important and listen to their needs as well. If we can parlay the knowledge base from the agricultural well that the city will be using to possibly additional agricultural uses, we attractive rate for the agricultural users as well. I think that's important for your consideration. It's your pleasure. I ask that you direct the city manager to look into that as well. It's something that we'll be talking about a little bit more, as much as we can, to encourage the city to make these steps that will attract industry here into our city. So we appreciate this coming forward. Take care.
Again, Al Hudson. We should do everything that's possible to help the cannabis industry because we plain and simply need the revenue. And while the cannabis growing process is not necessarily water use intensive, there does need to be a water flow and takes water to develop the planting. But as far as drilling this agricultural well, the item needs to actually be pulled from the agenda because one, it's not approved in the budget. Two, it's not in the listed as a capital improvement projects. And it's three, it's not in the Fremont Basin Irwin plan. Four, it robs the improvements of money from the water main replacement. Five, it's not in the 2000 water master plan. And the money that is to be used, we gotta know where it's coming from. Is it coming out of the Water Enterprise Fund? Can't use it. And the other thing is you have to go through the entire 218 process and establish water rates and such for because that comes under 218 and 2403. That means it's water comes from any source that has to go through the 218 process. And Mr. Platts, shame on you, you should know that. And not try to circumvent it. But in order for this to fly, we have to go through the rate establishment process and get the public involved in it. You just can't ignore the public and spend their money without any accountability. Thank you.
Mr. Hudson, can I ask you to repeat your third item for me?
Number 3, it's not in the Fremont Basin Irwin plan.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Platt is very well aware of it.
Anyone else? Okay, we'll bring it up here.
Yes, my question is going to be, where's the money coming from to do this well?
Currently, right now, we have about $7 million in water funds. I don't know the exact number. I'd have to look at the current financials, but it's around $7 million. And this would obviously add about $1 million savings annually. As far as the plans, it doesn't have to be included in the plans. We're not selling water to the public. The 218 process, to the new councils that don't know, because of obviously the stall and where we were at over the last 8 months, the water rate study is still moving forward, which relates to the public and the city's water system as it sells to the public to remove those tiers.
The development of secondary water systems to do irrigation instead of using treated water is a well-established process nationwide. That's why we circulate the wastewater from our plant. Using the cheaper agricultural water to do irrigation is just good sense. So we're not depleting our potable water supply. This will make available that will not have to be drafted out of the aquifers that we use for culinary water, 724 acre feet annually. So it's just good business to shift over to an agricultural use because using treated water for that never made sense. And the expense that's being saved to the general fund is over $1 million a year.
Yes, my concern is I hear that $7 million again, and I've brought it up over and over again. $7.6 million was removed from the enterprise fund, again, without council approval. I was told that it was put in there, that the standby fees were put into the enterprise fund, so they were removed from there. Again, once it's in an enterprise fund, council has to approve the removal of those monies, and it was never done. And the monies were never put back in the enterprise fund that I can see to this date, according to our financials.
Just as a note to that, they're still in the enterprise, because you got to remember it's one fund. So the Water Capital Fund is a fund within the water fund, so it's still all in the water fund. As you know, as I've told all the council, that did not account for all the projects that council has approved over the last 4 years. And that's something I'm working with our new finance director and also the auditors to make those project corrections, which will come back to council, which are all projects that were approved by council, and we will make those current corrections to move the water back into the Water Enterprise Fund, which is at about a negative $5-point-something million right now. So it will shift back, but the money doesn't disappear, which will do exactly what I believe you're insinuating.
Well, again, it will do that, but we haven't seen it, number one, and my concern is a capital improvement fund is not an enterprise fund. So to say that you put this underneath the enterprise fund, we still see a negative balance in the enterprise fund.
Yes, you got to remember, operations is different from the revenue that was received, because that was restricted under the 92 resolution. So that's why it was separated, because it never should have been part of the actual operations fund.
Again,
So
I
we
agree
did
with you 100%,
fix those.
but I also, over and over again, you need to come to council to remove these monies. You can't just take them and do what you want with them without council approval.
And I have never done so.
Well,
As
I
you know,
haven't,
every
but
project
all that
I've always
money
brought.
all of a sudden went from an enterprise fund to a capital improvement fund and was never brought back.
If I could address
Council's
that very
purpose.
simply, if you go to the first page of your budget, on the budget revenues and expenditures, there is listed the general fund, and then the city's enterprise funds. Water capital, sewer capital, airport capital, and dial-a-ride are all enterprise funds of the city.
Again, you don't move money out of those funds without council approval.
I don't think we can just let that float. Every capital expense has to come from some budget. And when you budget in your enterprise fund a capital account, it is for you to fund projects out of. And so it is simply one element of that enterprise fund.
Okay, you don't want it to float, you know, I don't want it to float either, because again, you're not getting council approval when you do this. Mr. Platt knows exactly what council approved for council improvements before you were here. Then all of a sudden, all these monies leave the enterprise fund, go into a capital improvement fund. You're saying they're underneath the enterprise fund, according to the budget. Again, our enterprise fund is in a negative balance. Why?
The budget, well, you didn't adopt the budget, that's right. The budget that was adopted by the council majority shows that the Water Capital Fund has a beginning balance of $7,705,000 at the beginning of July of 2018, and ending balance on June 30th of $9,703,000. That's not a deficit.
Is an ag well going to be part of the water fund, enterprise fund?
No, it will be operated.
So then you are transferring money out of the water fund to fund this project for whom?
For the wastewater system, because
For the wastewater system?
the way to maximize the use of the city's effluent is for the lake level to be maintained, and the city has used culinary water to keep the lake level so that you could irrigate the system from the lake. And so this process recognizes that for us to be able to continue to use it as a way to dispose of our effluent, the system has to be fully functional. And the general fund has been funding these expenses for, I don't know, 20 years. whatever it's been, how long it's existed there. And so this is, the net savings to the general fund will be $1 million a year. The actual operating expense of the system.
Where was it in the general fund that you were going to save $1 million a year?
The water fees.
The municipal
for-
account.
Yeah, but the general fund
In the last year, in 17-18, you showed 1.4 million in expenses, and then you said in 18-19 you said 750,000. That's before you did this in utility fees to the that the city was going to pay.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the current budget shows for utility fees.
I'm sorry, I didn't bring my budget with me. I'll tell you what I was doing, which is off subject, but I hope it'll make sense later. I was looking at the Parks and Rec admin and trying to figure out what the addition of 2 employees to the admin would constitute as an increase to the parks budget. As I'm looking at the budget, I looked at the 17-18 budget, and in the general fund had a deficit revenue. We lost money in the general fund. Now, personally, general fund lost money. That would constitute an emergency, and I would have thought that it would have been part of approving the budget that we would then turn around and say we have to make a line item adjustment and tell where that money's coming from. Now, what I think happened is that the city has emergency reserves, and without saying so, we took money out of the emergency reserves to cover that $500,000 deficit. Is that not true in the budget?
Talking about the budget,
The general fund revenues and expenditures.
you're talking about the budget that started on July 1st of 2017 and ended June 2018?
Correct.
Okay.
So, estimated actuals, I think is what you called it. Estimated actuals, and it showed a deficit.
So in looking at the general fund,
My point was.
well, I can answer your
Okay, go ahead.
The estimated actual revenues through June 30th of 2018, the general one was $5,823,000. The estimated actual expenditures were $6,320,000,
So we spent more than we took in. Okay, that's what I said.
$7,807.
Okay, that's close to 500,000.
And
Yes.
so when the council adopts the budget, that automatically goes to the reserve, and so you end up the year. So your starting balance at the beginning of the year, beginning fund balance was $534,000. You end with a fund balance of $5,509,000, and so you were still positive overall on the year.
Well,
Those
that
adjustments-
would have been the case, except we've settled a employment issue, and we've got some other overages that are occurring. So now we are going to be in deficit again this year, is what it's beginning to look like. And having said that, that's the question. I don't remember the previous council when they voted to approve the budget that they addressed the fact that they had spent more than they took in, and the fact that there's a nice reserve is just that. What did we do to try to maintain that reserve? Now we're taking on a project that's going to cost $425,000. We just spent $300,000. I think that gets rid of all of the excess revenue that you had in this budget, doesn't it? So
It doesn't, because you have right now, you have well over $5 million in reserve in the general fund.
that's
The actual
I guess
collected-
that's exactly the question, and that's the real question is the monies that we had before the year. Are we not considering those emergency reserves or not?
I don't know where you come up with the term emergency reserves. The city carries a fund balance in each of its accounts. If the city was to create an emergency reserve, that would be an identified thing. But we carry the reserves of the city in the fund balance.
Is the city not required to have a balanced budget and not spend more than it takes in?
you do a balanced budget, your beginning fund balance is part of that process. Because it's like any other kind of account.
Well, I would sit back and say that I would, as a council, not agree with that. I would prefer us to be living within our means in the year, and then if we have to step into the reserves that I'm calling reserves, what you're saying is beginning fund balance, that we approve that before we do so. Because what you are saying is we're going to spend more money than we took in this year, and that does not seem balanced to me.
Well, I think every element of the city's funding is on the table whenever you go through the budgeting process. Every dollar was reported to the council as we went through the process that the council just completed in adopting the budget. Beginning balances and ending balances are all part of that process. And they're all there. They're in the forms that were approved for the budget to go forward. If the council wanted to restrict a reserve for an emergency or whatever else you want to call it, that is an action the council could do, and then that balance would have to be carried as a restricted reserve. That has not happened at this point.
Okay. I thought we had discussed that about 8 months ago, and actually voted on how many people had to approve a vote to remove funds from our emergency reserve. I thought I read that in the newspaper.
The city has no emergency reserves. The city carries the fund balance. Because it seems to me if we say emergency reserve, we're putting some meaning there that is not envisioned. If the city wanted an emergency account, they should identify it as such. But the city's fund balance is visible at any time to see. If we look at what was one of the major reasons for the over expenditure, it said at the beginning of the year we anticipate our city utilities to be $1 million. Turned out we went up by $1,475,000, and $1.3 million of that is the water for the park.
And miraculously this year you've eliminated 600,000 of it without this well in place. How'd that happen?
I'm at a loss to know how to respond, because we're bringing to the council an opportunity to
I'm trying to look at historical numbers, and they mean nothing. You just said last year the city spent $1.3 million on water, and this year you're saying it's $700,000. How did you save $600,000 in water without this well?
We anticipated, because the council had been involved in the discussion, that the well would be built sometime during this year. And that's why the number was put in at that level. We discussed the well.
I've heard about it.
We discussed the well very clearly through the budget process. Two council members carry over will remember that discussion. That's why when we put the figure at $714,000 is what we thought we would spend by the end of June this year, because the well is not in place yet. In reality, we're probably going to end up spending more than that, because the well won't be installed immediately. We will still have to continue to pay the water bills. And so that $714,000 is probably not going to cover our water bill through the end of June. And so what we put together in the budget was an estimate of what it would be based upon when this well would go into operation. Every element of what we put in both expenditures and revenues is based upon an estimation of what we're going to accomplish. The estimation comes from looking at what we did in the past, looking at what we know about our current expenses, and probably in no case anywhere in your budget will those numbers come out exactly. Because when we say that our proposed
They better
budget,
come out exactly once. I mean, that's what your auditors come here to do, isn't it?
what I'm saying to you is we've adopted a budget that says the general fund budget revenues for 2018-19 are going to be $5,662,195. When the city closes its books on June 30th of 2019, that number will not be what the city's actual revenues were. The city's actual revenues are going to be higher or lower than that number. In every line item that you go through the city budget, the same thing will occur. Because it is a process of estimation. It's not an exact science. We try to estimate as closely as we can of what's going on. We have the discussions about what goes into that. That's what goes on in the process of the council deliberating and deciding what numbers are they going to put there. Because in the end, there has to be a number. that number is as much as possible comes as a result of a good analysis of what we think it's going to be.
Let me help a little bit on this. Remember back in July and June of last year, we really were in limbo as far as what we were doing in Parks and Rec, the golf courses. And so to have accurate numbers this year is an anomaly, as we all know. So we really didn't have a working budget until November, December. So we stopped watering the par 3, so that's a significant amount. We have cut back on the water we used on the city's park because we didn't know what was going to happen with all of those facilities, the Parks and Rec, the golf courses. We ended up getting the golf course dumped on us the very last week, basically, of June, and we took it over July 1st. So we've been trying to put everything back together. We're still not operating the par 3 or maintaining the par 3. And so those were extreme estimations based on a running bill. And we have always read meters, by the way, on municipals. Yes, they weren't billed until sometime 3 years ago, I guess, at this point now, 3 or 4 years ago. Because we're required to track how much water we use. So this is going to be the most logical for any golf course. Most golf courses that I have been around work off of either tertiary from their sewer plants, of how much they can provide, and or a well that's usually somewhere on facility. This has made a sense for a long time. When the city was built, there actually was a well which we believe to be under the pool. It shows on the original maps that there was a well that was originally initiated for the golf course. That well does no longer exist. So when they built the municipal system, then they tied everything over to the municipal system and has operated that way ever since. We know the sewer plant is actually, the lake is actually part of the system of the sewer plant, and will move forward to actually shedding operations and management of how they operate. But part of this plumbing and stuff that we got to do is to tie over all the infrastructure that's non-potable, which is basically all the irrigation systems for the golf course. How we manage the par 3, obviously, those are questions still to move forward. It's significant as far as the water savings just on that facility, and not using the municipal system to feed irrigation water. We don't need to put treated water on the golf course.
Or Central Park or the par 3.
Any of it we don't have to do. You got to remember, this isn't tainted, contaminated water.
No, it's affluent.
It's just not, it's not treated. And you got to remember, we don't treat our water. Even the water we come out of the ground, we don't have to treat it. We don't have water or issues to treat our water. So this water is going to come out. Can you drink it? Yeah, it'd be no different than on the ranch. So we know what the water quality is, but it's not going to be treated as this, because it's not going to go into any of the potable water systems. It will stay strictly as agriculture or irrigation, and will roughly save us about $1 million a year.
One thing we have here is Councilmember Lasinovich has been here longer than any of us, you know, and also City Manager Stockwell is new. So tell me if I'm wrong on this, but during his time, when he talks about a surplus, if they had money left over at the end of the year, that was a surplus. And what previous city councils try to do is build up and have a surplus left over. And that surplus was not counted as part of the budget. That was set aside. Am I speaking wrong, or?
That's
So,
close.
so what they tried to do was build and try and come up with, you know, $3, $4, $5 million surplus, and they would leave that there, and their budget would begin from there. So they didn't count that in the budget, current budget. And so, again, that's how we have been historically. And City Manager Stockwell is not, you know, he wasn't around when Councilmember Lasinovich was. So that's a difference of.
I understand that, and I think we all do, is we're not spending all the reserves, and they're not budgeting all the reserves, and I'm obviously not budgeting or asking to spend all the reserves. I'm actually trying to save $1 million a year of the city's operating system by being smart in how we operate. So we're way off base talking about the budget, and what we're doing here is I'm trying to save $1 million of the city and the taxpayers' money, and not throw it on the grass. So I'm asking that you allow us to move forward with drilling a well. This may not work. I can't tell you we plugged this in at 700 something feet based on the last well the city drilled. They will do an exploratory first and obviously verify that there's water before we go forward. We're not going to just drill the hole and say, oh, gee whiz, let's hope there's water. So they will do a test pilot to make sure and where those water aquifers are. We do know there's extensive aquifers under the city. But you never know. I've done wells before. You drill one here and 20 feet away you don't have water. So I'm not presuming that because I know there was a well there. And that's how they actually irrigated the golf course when they first started developing the city and the lake, because that was one of the first things they did. So requesting to actually spend money that we do have that actually will save us in turn roughly $1 million a year and allow us to put our municipal water where we really, in my mind, need it, which is to the projects that we are moving forward with.
Comments?
Fund 95 has no source of income and has no stated purpose as far as I can tell.
That's why I'm
It's a
asking the
slush fund, as far as I can tell.
I don't have slush funds. I have projects that I present to council to move forward to actually make our system whole.
What I would ask is that what I've presented as my issues didn't go away with anything that we've said. In 2017 and 18, we spent more than we took in. With this project, 2018 and 19 will be more money spent than we take in. I'd like to see how those monies are coming and where they're coming from on a single page. If that can be brought to us at the next meeting, I'd sit back and ask that we table this till the next meeting, subject to that information being brought to us, and then
That
we can act
has
with the
nothing to
full
do
council.
with where we're going. And
Yes, it
I know what
does.
you're saying.
It does. It
I-
does.
If
This
you'll-
is,
It is a philosophical question, and this is the place to ask it.
And this is the place to answer it. If you look at the budget that the council adopted, we start off with a fund balance in the water, $7,700,000.
Water fund doing this? I thought you told me it's not a water fund project. You're taking money from the water fund, but it's not a water fund, it's not gonna be part of the water fund when it's finished, is it? So you're taking money from an enterprise fund that happens to have a bank, and you're using it, to do general fund activity.
this is not general fund. This is part of our utility base. This is part of the water and sewer plant.
The lake is a part of the sewer plant.
And it feeds
The fe-
off
the-
of
the-
municipal
the-
water.
The well is not a part of the sewer plant. Or that's a finding that I think you're gonna have to say, that that's a material finding that I have to approve.
Let me give you one quick thing, right? Please let me finish, okay?
Okay.
So the water fund is, we'll end the year with $9,700,000. Starts the year with $7,700,000. The general fund begins the year with $5,500,000. And will end with $6,737,000. So if your concern is that this isn't a water expenditure, then you could move the expenditure to the general fund, and you would still have sufficient money to cover it. The budget for the general fund has excess over revenues of $1,227,000, projected through June 30th, 2019.
Somehow that's, my copy of the budget didn't have that in it. My excess revenue said 700,000.
I'm talking about 2018-19, not
Mhm, yeah.
2017-18.
That's one.
The only pages that we have are the same ones that are sitting right here. We've never distributed anything else. That's the only number that's ever been there. So you have money either in general fund or water fund to accomplish the project as
Well, again, I'm not saying that this can't. I'm not saying this can't continue the way it is. I'm just asking that that it be tabled for 2 weeks, and that and give you an opportunity to kind of go through the lines to give me a little bit clearer idea of where you're thinking this is all coming from and how it's going to fit together. Because at the moment, you're going to, as far as I can see, spend more money in 18-19 than you're taking in revenue, and I think that's irresponsible.
well, it'd be very helpful to sit down with you and go through what you have, the figures you have, so that we know how they reflect.
I've been offering to do that for a month and a half now.
Well, you've not offered it to me. I'm happy to make
That's
time
that's
to
a
sit
separate
down.
issue, but I've also made an outreach there too.
Okay, well, I'll make
Okay.
myself available.
Anyone else up here?
I think that, I know that when I have questions regarding the finances, I have been helped immediately. I've never had to wait more than 24 hours. If I have a question about why something is being paid, about numbers in certain lines, and it's not very kind of you to sit there and kind of roll your eyes and grimace at me, because
You're saying you know what I've done or not done. I'm sorry, I don't want to make it public.
What I am suggesting is that maybe a little education on both parts, so that you understand how things might be different, or, and parts of the budget that you still don't understand how they're working. I'm sure Mr. Ibanez or Mr. Stockwell would be happy to sit down, and I'm willing to support you in tabling it until you feel that you have the answers that you need.
Is that the council's recommendation that is there a motion to table it?
Motion to table it.
Sorry? Oh, we can do, okay, we'll do a second call at this time.
So, I'm a ratepayer. And ratepayers want me to table $1 million savings. I'll repeat it. I am a ratepayer. I represent ratepayers. And ratepayers do not want you to table $1 million savings. So, if you're going to table $1 million in savings, maybe it is a good idea that you have some proactive engagement on the budget and satisfy yourself. But tonight, I don't recommend that you table $1 million savings for the ratepayer. Shall I repeat it?
Again, reminding everybody, please state your name and you have 2 minutes.
Al Hudson. I've been listening rather carefully, and it looks like a shell game to me. That's what it looks like. But what no one has addressed is that this is a foundation. The taking of the money out of the Water Enterprise Fund is the foundation for a significant water rate increase passed on to every single person that's paying a water rate. You can't take money away without replacing it, plain and simple. And that is what is being attempted. Thank you.
Anyone else?
David Stafford, California City. Part of This $7 million water deal, was that created by the standby monies that was collected all these years? It wasn't? Where's the standby money at?
Part of it is, yes.
Okay, I'll tell you what, that standby money, if I'm not mistaken, wasn't that for new pipes, new water to areas that didn't have water? Yeah, that's it. Isn't that what it was set up and designed for? It's not set up and designed to rebuild what is existing. That's not what we said. Everybody in town blew up over that at one time. This was to put water lines where people wanted to build that did not have water because the city did not get it to them. That's what that money's for. And I hope and pray we use it for new water lines to new areas of the city as we get ready to develop them. Thank you.
Just to clarify, that actually changed in the 92 resolution. It's to maintain and replace water infrastructure and upgrades to the actual system. 82, it was everything. 92, it narrowed it down.
What it said in 92.
Yes, it was to maintain the actual, not for maintenance, it was actually for capital replacement and upgrade of facilities.
Well, I'll tell you what, you know, this city's done it. We had a tax one time for everybody in the city to get water lines put in, and that's what it was going to be for, and the money ended up going for repair. That's where they spent all the money, so there was no new pipes put in.
I think we're
Mr.
going
Stafford,
Our city can
Mr.
set
Stafford.
stuff up.
off subject a bit.
Let's get back to the real business on hand. We're talking about $1 million savings, and I'm a ratepayer. I'm a ratepayer on more than one property, and it would be the savings to us. Now, Mr. Hudson said, well, if we take $300 or $425,000, how is that going to be replaced? It's real easy. If you're going to save $1 million in rate water use, okay, we make it up in 1 year. That's the whole purpose of an agricultural well. And yes, you're right, Mr. Platt. There was a well. I was here when that well was there, and it serviced the waterfall, it serviced the park area, it serviced the golf course, and then we did funny things with the swimming pool. They said, well, we don't need that well anymore because we have a municipal water system. We don't need potable water on the golf course. We don't need potable water feeding the lake. If we do, then why are we putting tertiary water in there? So I think the business at hand is real simple. Do you want to save $1 million a year for the taxpayers, for me, for Mr. Tuig, for Mr. Stafford, and all the other owners in this city that pay their water bill every month? Or do you want us to continue to pay $1 million so we can keep the lake full? And you know what I'd like to see? I'd like to see the waterfall moving again. You're not going to get the waterfall moving again on potable water. I don't know how much that would cost, but there was a lot of water that went over the top of that waterfall. So at $1 million in savings, that's the objective, not whether or not the stupid number was in the budget. I probably could take a copy of the budget, I know it like I know my own, and show you.
Tim, time, please.
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes.
If I
Hold.
could just interject just quickly. Part of this goes back to Mr. Hudson had made a number of challenges to the water rate study previously, and part of that was related to the use of the water in the lake. And during that time frame, I was looking at why are we using potable water, and he was right. We ended up paying for that. Started paying for that water. I indicated that we needed to be doing that, and so the rate study reflects, however, the fact that that lake is part of that system for the wastewater treatment, and it needs to be maintained at certain levels. And so what we're doing, in a way, I guess, is supplementing it with potable water. So my thought at the time, and I kind of brought this up and talked with Craig about this, I can't remember if he raised it or if I did, but it was, is there a way that we can stop using potable water and start utilizing this groundwater? So that subject came up, and that's now being explored, and now it's before you tonight, with the concept that the original system was set up that the lake would be maintained at certain levels. Now this would enable you to do that without using potable water. So in my view, this is part of the wastewater treatment. In order to maintain that, see, you treat the water and then it has to go somewhere. We determine it goes in the lake. You need to maintain that lake at certain levels, and you can either use potable or you're going to use this agricultural water. I think there's every justification in the world for that to be part of the wastewater treatment. You could pay for it out of the enterprise fund for the wastewater treatment. However, I guess as City Manager Stockwell indicated, if you're not comfortable with that for any reason, you could pay for it out of the general fund. So I would just encourage you to do that because of the savings and because it makes perfect sense to me. It probably was what was originally intended, and at some point they covered up the well, and now you're using potable water, which is an inefficient, and the state doesn't want you to be doing that anyway. So this is more compliance, I would say, with what the state wants you to be doing. And you know, if it's a wastewater treatment expense, then that should come out of that fund. That would be my thought.
Mayor Pro Tem Ron Smith, California City. I'm a ratepayer here too. I hear potential. I don't hear $1 million savings. I hear a potential. Heard it was either a might or a maybe. The bigger issue here, this is not a, I hear about transmissions lines. This is an agricultural well. Has nothing to do with new water lines going to our homes. It sounds like just the basis for another rate increase. An opportunity to spend money. When it comes to the matter of the reserves, philosophically, that has got to be determined. The prior council voted to be able to demand 4/5 to take money out of reserves. Then the last council, because that did not suit them, changed it to just a majority. I would encourage you to get this philosophical issue, this practical issue, this precedent that has become something that is just normal working, protect our reserves. $300,000 was spent that supposedly our city council is to approve, and this is just another $400,000. Potential savings of $1 million, but it's potential. You have to deal with the reserve issue before you can go and spend any of the citizens' money, please.
I'm sorry, I had to actually do some calculations. Our max producing well was around $75,000. We won't have to pump as much as our maximum well. So when I'm using electrical costs, I'm using actual data. I can tell you how much water was actually pumped on those facilities and estimate it by the power and the cost of the limited amount of infrastructure we'll have. Do I know it down to the dollar? I'm sorry, I do not. But I am pretty good at putting estimated dollars together based on a lot of experience in history.
Any other second round? If not, I'll bring it up here. Okay, up here, second time.
Make a motion, we table it for 2 weeks.
A motion has been made to table it for 2 weeks.
Second.
And it's been seconded. City Clerk?
Councilmember Johnson?
I will say yes.
Asenovich?
Yes.
Paris?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Stump?
Yes.
Motion carried.
So it's been tabled for 2 weeks. If we can, Public Works Director Platt, if you guys can bring us more fidelity, and Finance Director Ibanez, if you can bring us where the money's coming from, and just more fidelity than what we have today. Okay, we are now at Council agenda. This portion of the meeting is reserved for council members to present information, announcements, and items that have come to their attention. The Brown Act precludes council, staff, public discussion. Short staff responses are appropriate. The council will take no formal action. A council member may request the city clerk to calendar an item for consideration at a further meeting or refer an item to staff. Councilmember Johnson.
There was an incident not too long ago in our city where one of our businessmen was approached by a customer who made that business person feel very uncomfortable because some racially charged things were said. It bothers me so much that we're in such a diverse city and that we have so many different sorts of people here, different ages, different walks of life, different backgrounds. I like to think I believe in my city and I believe in the good in everyone. We can find the good in everyone here. I would like to express to anyone listening tonight that if you see something like this happen, if you see someone being dragged down because their skin's a certain color or they're from a certain part of the world or they speak a second language, you know, we need to stand up for them and not tolerate, you know, even witnessing that sort of abuse. I'm very disappointed in what we've shown. I was all about character counts tonight, and this came to my attention, and it really bothered me some. So I'm hoping as a community that see something, say something, there's something to it. When you witness people being treated unfairly or differently because of something so trivial, I'm pretty sure if you skin us all, we all look the same. You know, no matter what language we speak or where we grew up or what our education is. So I just want to encourage people. I know there are people who are doing it and who are standing up and saying the right things at the right time, and I appreciate that. But I'm hoping we can continue that. That's all.
Councilmember Lasinovich.
I have nothing tonight.
Councilmember Paris.
I have something. It's my opinion only. It is time to clear the air and let the citizens of California City know what took place with this $300,000 payment to Frank Garcia. On February 7th, 2018 at 12:35 p.m. at City Hall, I was assaulted and battered by Frank Garcia Huizar at City Hall. I reported the crime to the city manager, Bob Stockwell. I was told by the city manager that an investigation would be done by an outside agency. A few days later, I was contacted by Chief Hurtado, who wanted a report of what happened. I brought the chief a written report of the assault and advised him that I wanted criminal charges filed against Mr. Huizar for assault and battery on a city official. On March 14th, 2018, I was contacted by an investigator from Sacramento who took my statement. I was advised by City Manager Stockwell that when the report was returned, it would be turned over to Chief Hurtado, who would take action on Mr. Huizar. I was advised that the report was returned to the city 14 days later. After about a month of not hearing anything, I made an appointment with the city manager to find out if he had received the report. He stated that he had the report. I asked if I could have a copy of the report. I was denied. I asked if I could read the report. I was denied. The city manager did state that the investigator stated that the assault happened just the way I stated it did. He further stated that the investigator felt that Mr. Huizar was lying. I asked Mr. Stockwell if he was going to turn the report over to Chief Hurtado, to which he stated no, It was still an ongoing investigation. It has been over 11 months since Mr. Stockwell received the report, and he has still not turned the report over to our chief law enforcement officer. It appears to me there is a possible conspiracy going on here. Further, Mr. Stockwell was advised by me that California City Municipal Code Section 2-4.203, titled Disciplinary Action.
I apologize. If it's going to continue, I might want to call it a closed session discussion.
Okay.
Litigation.
If it's going to continue. Let me advise you, you advised us last week this was over, done with, end of story. The people of California City needs to know what took place.
That's true, but I'm concerned about liabilities for the city.
Okay. Let's have a closed session at this time. So
You have to make a motion by four of you.
okay, I'll make the motion that we go into closed session.
I second.
City Clerk?
Councilmember Johnson? Lisanovich?
Yes.
Paris?
Let's go. Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Stump?
Yes.
To add a potential litigation item, and then I guess we will recess now to closed session. Good.
Okay, before we go into closed session, we will have the public speak. So come up and say your name and where you're from, and then you can have your say.
My name is Al Hudson. When going into closed session on this issue, the public does have a right to know pursuant to the government code that I had previously cited. The public does have a right to know how things occurred and what is happening and the outcome and the facts. So Councilman Paris is correct. It is his choice to state precisely what happened. And going into closed session to discuss it is to keep the public continually in the dark. And that is not the objective of the Brown Act. You know the one I'm talking about, 45759.1. Thank you. If you don't do it like, if you don't want to follow the Brown Act, let's look at the licenses and that's a requirement.
Anyone else? If not, we're going into closed session at this time.